You're forced to kneel on the floor by your wife, tied with a dog leash. The man in the room needs a dog to guard the door. The sounds of sex coming from inside are jarring to your ears. This blatant prostitution is the 9th time this month. Because you don't have a high-paying job, the various expenses of life are suffocating you. Desperate, your wife has resorted to prostitution to supplement her income. You hate the injustice of the world, hating that you lack a high-paying job. You just want to maintain your dignity as a human being. When your disheveled wife walks out and places $500 in your hand, you can no longer hold back your emotions and burst into tears. Meanwhile, a customer nearby praises your wife's skills in bed. The root of all this evil lies in believing that lie. The most dangerous lie about money is the one hardworking people are proudest of. If I'm responsible and budget harder, eventually the numbers will work. For most low-paid workers, that's not a plan, it's a slower way to stay trapped. You can color code the spreadsheet, delete the food app, and skip 2 small treats. And still arrive at the same ugly moment on the 24th of the month. Staring at a checking account under $90, feeling your chest tighten. Because payday is still days away. That's not a discipline problem, it's what it looks like when effort is wasted, poured into a system that has absolutely no room to reward it. Look at the kind of life people call doing the right thing. You show up on time, work the shift, and don't blow money on anything dramatic. You watch finance videos at night while eating the cheapest dinner you can tolerate, and yet the money keeps disappearing through ordinary doors. $794 for a shared apartment, $219 for a car. About $400 on food you never fully track because life is tiring. Every receipt feels too small to matter until the month is over. Then comes the ritual, payday, and a brief moment of relief. That loop convinces people of the wrong conclusion. They think the problem is that they aren't strict enough. So they try another budget, another reset, another promise made on a Sunday night. 11 days later, the system breaks again, not because they're lazy, but because budgeting a low income without changing earning power is useless. It's often just cleaner bookkeeping for the exact same struggle. And here's where the fantasy gets people stuck even longer. When they finally admit the paycheck is too small, they jump to the opposite extreme. They start fantasizing instead of selecting. Rich means doctor, founder, lawyer, engineer, real estate star, or influencer, something shiny, distant, and expensive. So the brain does something convenient, it declares the whole game impossible. Harry was living inside that exact trap. He was 31, working retail at a discount home store, stacking boxes, running the register, doing the kind of labor that leaves your feet sore, and your brain foggy by the time you finally get home. His salary never crossed $39,000 a year. After taxes and those tiny benefits jobs love to mention as if they change everything, he had $2,287 a month to work with. Not enough to feel reckless, and not enough to feel secure. So no, Harry's breakthrough didn't begin with more motivation. It began when one of his favorite money myths finally died. He stopped asking how to become rich. That question sounds ambitious, but it's useless, too vague, and too cinematic. That shift sounds small until you watch what it destroys. It kills the ego fantasy that wealth arrives through identity first. It kills the idea that your current salary dictates your future ceiling. It kills the excuse that all millionaire paths require giant paychecks, or elite credentials, or years you supposedly don't have. What Harry needed was not a millionaire fantasy. That's why the first move in changing your finances isn't cutting deeper, it's seeing clearly. If your entire plan depends on surviving your current paycheck more elegantly, you aren't on a wealth path yet. You're just becoming a more organized version of stuck. And once you see that, you can finally stop worshiping the wrong kind of effort. Here's the part people hate, because the math makes the excuses feel childish. Harry wasn't broke because he lacked motivation. He was broke because his current inputs were producing exactly what you'd predict on paper. A salary under $39,000 a year. Take-home pay of $2,287 a month, with rent taking up $794. Now look at what his evenings were buying him. Finish a shift at 5, lose an hour scrolling, add games, add random videos. Add the little emotional leak of hanging around people who smirk at ambition. They call it realism, and then you just repeat the cycle. And here's the uglier part, those 360 hours weren't neutral, they were compounding in the wrong direction. Low focus becomes low skill growth, and low skill growth becomes low income options. That's why the social side matters more than most people want to admit. When every conversation drags you back to old high school stories, old complaints, old limits, you aren't just wasting your mood, you're wasting your direction. Harry realized on the bus home that he knew more about other people's old drama than he knew about his own future, and that sentence sounds emotional. So he made a colder decision. He stopped donating his attention to people who normalized being stuck. Not because he was superior, but because belief at that stage was tiny and fragile, and tiny things die fast when they're surrounded by ridicule. He muted the group chats that were basically complaint machines. 10 people, that number matters, not just watching some motivational stuff. 10 specific people who had already done what he wanted to do. Specifically in writing and online offers. Names written in a notebook, followed on social platforms, interviews tracked down. One used copywriting book for $7 and some change. Then he asked the question that changed the quality of his effort. If I met my heroes today, would they care about the current me? The honest answer was no, brutal but useful, because it gave him a target. And suddenly every podcast became evidence. So when he stole back 90 minutes a day, it wasn't self-help theater. It was just simple arithmetic. 90 minutes on workdays is 7.5 hours a week, roughly 30 hours a month. Building a second part-time track without needing a second boss, same body, same salary. Here's the hidden split nobody talks about. Two people can both be working hard, both come home tired, both stare at the same shrinking bank balance, and still be living in completely different economies. One is selling hours, the other is quietly building ownership over a skill. On the surface they look identical, taking the exact same bus ride. The same thing happens with rooms. A $67 meetup sounds trivial if you're comfortable. It feels reckless if your account is always one surprise away from panic. But again, the price of the ticket isn't the real story. The real story is if you live in rooms where your salary defines your identity. Or whether you enter rooms where proof of value matters more than your job title. Harry didn't walk in as the retail guy. He walked in with a one-page site and sample projects on his phone, and at least one paying client behind him. Same person, different layer of value. And that's who gets systematically skimmed by the system. The person who keeps offering effort in places that only reward obedience. The person who confuses exhaustion with advancement. The person whose whole life is organized around protecting the paycheck, but never upgrading the person receiving it. If that sounds harsh, good, it should. Because once you see the split, you cannot unsee it. So be honest tonight. Are your extra hours building an asset someone can buy tomorrow? Or are they disappearing into recovery, scrolling, and another month of being easy to replace? Most people don't stay broke because they lack effort. They stay capped because the moment money enters the conversation, their voice changes. Their shoulders tighten, they start sounding apologetic, and that's where income gets strangled. If you can't explain your value in one clean sentence, and ask for a number without flinching, the market will keep pricing you at whatever your manager decided. Harry had to cut that habit with something almost embarrassingly small. Not a rebrand, not a website, not a big business plan. One sentence on paper, one price spoken out loud, over and over until his body stopped treating it like danger. He hated the word sales for the same reason most people do. He imagined manipulation, slick smiles, and fake confidence. But the real trap was worse than that. If you never learn to sell, you spend your life being sold to. Sold on your low ceiling, sold on waiting, sold on the idea that being useful is enough, but it's not enough. Harry took a plain sheet and wrote a plain line. I help small local businesses turn boring product descriptions into clear words. Words that bring in more customers, starting with one test project. That was the move, dry, mechanical, no poetry, no hype, just a sentence that could survive contact with a real person. Then he said it aloud until it stopped sounding like a costume, and started sounding like a fact. That's how a different financial life begins. Not with a breakthrough feeling, but with a script and a number, and a transfer you can repeat when you're tired. If you had to pick just one tonight, which would it be? Write your offer, say your price, or open the separate account. Here's the part people always want me to ruin with a fantasy ending. They want the montage where the tiny salary turns into a luxury car, the bigger apartment, the visible proof that it all worked. But that's exactly where most progress dies, not when you earn more. It dies when you start dressing up too early. When one good month makes you feel promoted before your balance sheet agrees. Harry's real win wasn't the extra $933. It was that he didn't let that money leak into a lifestyle upgrade, pretending to be self-respect. He almost did, bigger lease, better car, a faster way to look successful. Instead, he sat there with two screens open, the banking app, and that photo of the life he actually wanted. Not the flex version, but the useful version. A small bright office, a calendar with client calls, savings written down where he couldn't ignore them. Reality, vision, that tiny boring pause is what protected the next decade from being eaten by one emotional purchase. And there's another promise people almost never hear. You're allowed to build this slowly. You don't need to become a different species. You don't need a millionaire personality. You need a repeatable behavior when the first little bit of momentum finally shows up. When the money lands, don't immediately ask what you can upgrade. Ask what this buys you in time, distance, and survival. Maybe it buys 1 month of breathing room. Maybe it buys a course, a coach, or a cleaner schedule. A separate account that keeps your future from mixing with rent and impulse. Small choices, massive downstream effect. That's the exit door, not a yacht, not a viral breakthrough, an exit door. Enough savings that bad luck stops feeling like an extinction event. So if you're sitting there on a basic salary, don't ask whether this can make you look rich. Ask whether it can make you harder to break. Then make the next move embarrassingly small and brutally clear. Open the separate account and write the number,